first of the year, so we didn't even think about the budgeting of the heads of the dates. So we can do on our busy lives and busy world, you know, it just is that's going to happen. So let's call the meeting to order. Again, we appreciate you all coming out and driving through this inclement weather. It's the beginning of the year. We anticipate a busy year. We do anticipate wanting to enlarge our numbers. So be thinking about, you know, if you have anyone that you are working with now currently that might be a good fit for this group, we would love to have recommendations. We're going to be actively, again, recruiting ourselves, but we look forward to your advice on that. May we have an approval of the September 6th meeting, the minutes, I'm sorry. A motion, please.
I do it even though I wasn't here, or?
Have you read the minutes?
Yeah.
Okay, if you've read them and you're okay with them, I'll take a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second? Second. Okay, is there a question on that? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Hello, this is Loretta Jones and Felicia Jones.
Loretta Jones. Loretta Jones from Healthy African American Families.
Hi, Loretta. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you today?
We are terrific, and welcome to the group.
Thank you so much for letting me know. I appreciate it.
Is there? Do we have anyone else on the phone other than Loretta?
And Felicia
Hi,
Jones.
everyone. So Loretta and Felica are calling in from the Healthy African American Families.
Okay. And then, you know, since we have you on the phone, we'll take a moment before we go into the agenda to go around the table and do introductions so that you all will know who's here. I'm Fabian Wesson, the Assistant Deputy Executive Officer for Public Affairs, Legislation and Media.
Hi, Jill Wynott, I'm Chief Operating Officer.
Daniela Arellano, Senior Public Information Specialist.
Humberto Lugo with IVA, Department of Justice Task Force, Coachella Valley.
Alicia James, I'm with Lee Andrews Group. We are consultants for event planning and outreach for the Environmental Justice Community Partnership.
Carrie Roberts from American Lung Association.
New member Oscar Rodriguez from Oakview Comunidad in Huntington Beach.
Good morning, everybody. Also a new member. My name is Eddie Marquez. I'm also on the Local Government and Small Business Advisory Board. Pleased to be here. I represent, I'm a former chairman of the Orange County Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, former corporate. I was with Edison and some big corporate companies in the last 20 years. So, and now I have my own company. So happy to be here.
I was just one person from Edison last night, Dave Ford. Yeah, you knew him. Everybody knows Dave.
And hello, everyone. This is Soma Pisapati on the phone. Sorry, I actually had it on mute and was listening to the webcast, but I realized there's a bit of a delay on the webcast, so want to let everyone know I'm here.
Oh, thank you, Suma.
Thank you, Suma.
And I'm Nancy Feldman, I'm from the District's Council's Office.
Wonderful. Okay. Appears that we have everyone here. Are we okay? And you all can hear us okay?
Yes.
Yep.
Great. Okay, the next item on the agenda is a review of the follow-up action items. And I do have those, don't I not do? Okay, action item number 1 was to follow up with Suma Pisapati's interest in incorporating environmental justice representation during the permitting process. Example, more public participation, more consideration for EJ communities. She's interested in a formal presentation. On that item, staff delivered a presentation on SCAQMD's permitting process during the September 6th meeting. Staff extended an invitation for SUMA to present on how to engage the community during the permitting process. SUMA has agreed to follow up with environmental justice organizations and get back to us on how she would like to proceed. Action item number 2, the Advisory Council to provide Young Adults Advisory Council recommendations. Staff did not receive any recommendations from Advisory Council members, And on another note, we did have our first Young Leaders Advisory Council meeting. That roster is now full, and it's a fantastic group, a great group. We will send you the dates of the meetings, invite all of you to attend the meetings to see what's in store for us with our young leaders. Future looks bright. Action item number 4. Advisory Council to provide suggestions on Riverside County potential advisory council members. Staff has not received any recommendations from advisory council members. Action item number 5, share interagency summit executive summary with advisory council. There are copies of the, on the table of the interagency summit executive summary. Please, we advise you to take a copy and read it and comment on it. We would love to have comments on that. Suma, you're still on the line. I'll wait for you to unmute.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, I just wanted to follow up with you on how you'd like to proceed with engaging the other environmental justice organizations.
Yeah, so I appreciate the fact that this continues to be on the agenda. It continues to be a priority for many of the community-based groups that I work with. Thus far, I've reached out to the folks at CV, given that I'm on the board. At this point, given their capacity and where their priorities are in terms of deadlines, they're currently focused on a number of initiatives with the Air District, including implementation of SB 617, and as I understand it, there is discussion about the public process associated with the bill's implementation, and the staff's perspective is that there may be significant overlap and improvements to public participation that is developed through that process. And so it continues to be a priority, but I think more generally, the more general permitting process with respect to public participation, I'd like to table it for now.
Not a problem. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, the next item on the agenda is number 4, the AB 617 Community Air Protection Program, identifications of communities for monitoring. We have our Chief Operating Officer, Jill Wynot, who's going to do the presentation. Thank you, Jill.
You're welcome. Thank you. I'm very pleased to present some information to you on this bill. I'm going to kind of just walk through what the basics are. Umberto, you can probably add in. I think you're probably much more familiar with this than a lot of other folks in the community so far. And then talk about ways that we're trying to get input and how the community can get engaged with us. So this is actually a really exciting new program. It was signed into law just late last year. There's a lot of details to work out, but essentially it's really a community-centered program, and it gives a lot more emphasis on collaboration with communities, special emphasis to disadvantaged areas and environmental justice communities, and it really provides a lot of resources statewide that will enhance all of the Air District programs that we're working on for EJ and toxics. It has some very aggressive timelines. I'll highlight some of the upcoming things. And as I mentioned, it's really a program that we're trying to engage with different communities and get as much input as possible. So there's really 5 main elements to the program. One of them sort of ancillary, but it's really focusing on working with communities, getting, some communities will need additional air monitoring. Some communities will get specific emission reduction plans, which will be like mini air quality plans to how you're going to address whatever their issues are in those communities. This is going to result in a lot better and easier access to emissions data from these monitoring programs and also other statewide programs. There's an element of this that requires facilities that are in the state's cap and trade program for greenhouse gases to put on best retrofit emission controls, and that's something that I'll talk a little bit more about as well. And then it's driving us into adopting more clean technology in these areas. And so there's actually a separate Assembly Bill 134 that put in a lot of money for diesel truck replacements and other things. So I'll briefly highlight each of these. So the first step, before you even get to these main elements, is identifying communities. And so throughout the state, there have been many meetings going on to talk to people about what criteria should we put in place to identify the communities, and what is the definition of a community, because it can mean a lot of different things. One of the many details that needs to get worked out is how many communities are going to be involved in the first year. We're hearing that it might be around 10 or 12 throughout the state. South Coast, our 4-county region, we're typically about 40 or 50%. But we really, even with the significant resources we got, can only handle maybe 2 or 3 communities the first year. Depends on what the needs are. But the program, if we get continued funding, will add communities every year. So it's envisioned that this will go on for decades until we can address a lot of these issues. In some communities, we may need additional monitoring to figure out what exactly are the pollution burdens or the problems in those areas. We've already been out to many community meetings, and some communities are telling us, you don't need any more monitoring. You've done enough monitoring, or we know what the problems are. Let's skip this step and go right into how do you reduce it. Initial plans for the communities are due this October, and then monitoring in these communities, if needed, would start in July, which is really a tight timeline. If we identify communities, then the next step is to do a community emission reduction plan. So if this is an area that's, near transportation corridors, or do they have dust issues, whatever their problems are, is it toxics? The statewide overall strategy of how to put this together is also due in October. Once the communities are identified, then we have a year to put in place, adopt a local plan, and then that plan would get updated every 5 years. One of the questions that we also have is, once you identify a community and start doing monitoring or emission reductions, does that go forever? Or is it 2 years or 3 years or 5 years? And it could vary depending on the needs. We know that mobile sources are really the lion's share of what produces cancer risk, exposure to diesel and particulates. But we've seen in some of our early toxics work in the last year or two that there are some communities that have hexavalent chrome issues, or they may have dust, or it could be some other areas. So we're completely open to what the monitoring and or emission reduction strategies would be, depending on what communities we identify. Part of this program is a unified statewide reporting, which is anticipated to start in 2019. Air districts already collect robust emissions data from our larger stationary sources, our factories. We collect what are called criteria and air toxics. The state is also collecting greenhouse gas emissions. So this bill now says that the state will have a unified reporting system. So the state's working with all the air districts to figure out the best way to coordinate that effort and not have duplication for the facilities and the information. And then there's also supposed to be better websites and other ways to share this data with community members and others that are interested. So the facilities that are in the state cap and trade program, the concern has been that some of them are possibly falling behind in adding controls for other pollutants, like toxics and criteria pollutants. So there's going to be a couple of different efforts. One is there's now a requirement that any facility in this cap and trade program at the state must put in best available retrofit control technology. So air districts kind of have an ongoing process where we look at this, and we're in the process now of amending our reclaim program, which is our state nitrogen oxides program. It's a cap and trade program to require that those facilities will do the best retrofit controls. This bill sort of accelerated our schedule a little bit, but it's work that's already getting started. And then in addition, all of the air districts will contribute their information on what is the best control for a heater or a boiler or a spray booth or whatever into a statewide clearinghouse so that there'll be one source of information for the state of California. In terms of clean technology investments, I mentioned briefly AB 134. It actually provided a substantial amount of funding. Our portion here in our 4-county area for the first year was over $107 million. This funding is restricted to an existing program, the Carl Moyer program, that funds replacing older, high-emitting diesel equipment such as trucks and tractors, ag equipment, things like that. And so we're getting those trucks off the road faster than their normal turnover rate, which really reduces diesel particulate and toxic risk. We've actually gone ahead and done some early actions on this, and we've committed about half of the money. We're actually looking for input on projects and areas for the other half of the money later this year and next year. But in our early actions, well over 80%, 88% of those projects, the trucks are located or they travel heavily through these environmental justice areas. So that's a win-win for everybody. So the first question right out the gate is, how do you identify the communities? So this process, we can identify an awful lot of communities that we already know have more pollution than their neighbors, that really need some additional attention. But we're going to come up with dozens or possibly 100 of these, and how do you possibly prioritize those? And then that will help us determine which ones will get air monitoring and or emission reduction plans, and then the outcome hopefully will be clean air improvements. So our approach has been to go out. We've started initially with 5 community meetings to get community input. We're also looking at a variety of information that we already have available, and that will help inform those types of recommendations. Some of the available information we have is AQMD has a lot of information on the facilities that we permit. There's over 27,000 facilities ranging from gas stations and dry cleaners all the way up to refineries and large chemical plants. We also have a lot of information we know about freight and transportation corridors. So we're looking at that, and that's helping us identify in a preliminary way some of the communities we might want to look at. We also have a study that we've done off and on since 1990. Every 5 or 8 years or so, we do a very comprehensive monitoring of a lot of air toxics, and then we model the cancer risk. And you can see in this little map here, the darker colors are areas where the extra cancer risk from air pollution is higher. So the darker colors are the higher, and you can see it's concentrated in the ports, near major airports, and along transportation corridors. And about 85+% of that is driven by trucks, ships, planes, trains, some of the heavy-duty diesel. There's also a tool statewide called CalEnviroscreen, and this is a similar type of a program, but it models, there's 17 different factors in there. It takes everything from poverty levels to environmental, not just air, but water, pesticides, education levels, access to healthcare, and it also can kind of lay out where there are some of these areas that might need more attention. Kind of the nice thing is if you overlay our mates with the CalEnviroscreen environmental indicators, there's a pretty good overlap. Not one-to-one, but it's pretty good. So all these tools can help us. Also, we're looking at what do we know already from monitoring in some of these communities or emission reduction programs. We're also looking to see sort of the capacity of these communities. Who's got administrative and technical resources, interest, readiness, participation, and existing or partnerships that we can enter into quickly, at least for the first year or 2. So for feedback, we've gone out and done 2 of our 3 community meetings, and we focused heavily on how do you identify and come up with criteria, and then how do you prioritize that, and then also how would you define a community. It may be multiple cities in the same sort of air pocket. It may be a portion of a city that has a specific need. There's a process for a community to recommend themselves and nominate themselves to be considered. And you can see the information on the left. We need to know where you are, kind of describe what you are, what do you need, and what are your concerns. And you can send this in by email, you can snail mail it, however, but we're asking for initial input by May 7th, and we're starting to see a little bit of interest with that. So, I'm sorry there's stuff on the top there, but this is the timeline just for this year. So we're getting public input. I've got a slide coming up that shows you where the additional community meetings are, and we definitely encourage you to help spread that news about those meetings and let people know about them and participate. So we're getting a lot of input on how do we select the community and what recommendations we have. We need to put together a draft report, and then we're going to send that out to communities and get some additional feedback. We're due to take a list of all the communities that we think need to be in this program and which ones would be, priority ranked. So depending on what the state determines, we'll start tackling those. And then it goes to the Air Resources Board, that's the statewide agency, in October for their board to take these recommendations from the individual air districts and see how they're going to move forward. But there's actually over 36 air districts in the state of California. It's very likely that the first year, there'll maybe 6 or so air districts will have 1 or more communities, because you just cannot roll this out everywhere. And some of the areas don't have the same types of problems that we see in the rural areas with lots of concentration. So then in 2019, the monitoring will continue. If we do monitoring, it has to start in the summer, and then emission reduction plans, and then there needs to be a really good way to assess the progress and report on that progress. As I mentioned, every year in October, additional communities will get layered in. We're really hopeful that we will get sustained funding. We got $10.7 million this year for AB 617, and that's a really good start. We hired 36 or so people, or we will be hiring 36 or so people for the additional workload. We also hired over 10 people, or 10 and a half, we're splitting one between the two, for the AB 134 programs, for the truck programs, because we're getting so much more money that we need more staff to do contracts, et cetera. But we will only be able to add additional communities every year if we get sustained and significant funding, because otherwise there just will not be enough money and manpower to do it. Also in 2019, even though we're already starting in 2018, we'll do more of the rule updates and get the facilities to start adding best controls if they haven't done that already, and that's the anticipated timeline for the statewide emission reporting system. These are the 3 remaining community meetings. We've been in, help me, we went to
First one was in Commerce, and then we went to Wilmington a couple weeks ago.
So these are all evening meetings. We offer Spanish translation, and we're talking about the same kind of things here, but just in a little bit more detail about all these programs and what kind of criteria and which communities we should look at. So there's one in Riverside coming up in March, and then there's 2 in April in Loma Linda University in San Bernardino, and then also in Anaheim. So we're trying to get to all the different areas of the basin and get as much input as possible. The first couple meetings we had about 100 people each, and we had some very good participation. So it worked out pretty well, I think. So here, and this is in your handout, there's a variety of ways you can stay connected with AQMD and find out more about this program or any other programs that you're interested in. So that's one thing you can do there. And then this is my contact information. I also have cards here if you have any follow-up questions. And I appreciate your attention and be happy to answer any questions and get some input. Thank you.
So my question on this is, the input you're taking now is to develop an RFP for communities? Is this going to be part of an RFP that you need to solicit to?
It's not an RFP.
It won't be an RFP?
No, it's a recommendation.
Recommendation, okay. So then based on the community organizations that participate and say, these are priority communities, then you guys will say, you know what, let's send the funding there. Without an RFP, that's right? No, they don't need to apply. I'm just a little bit confused.
You're a little confused about the process. Yeah. So now communities can self-recommend.
Yeah,
that's the form that she was talking about. Then once we identify communities, AQMD will take this identification list to CARB. It'll be up to CARB to make the final
that's what I'm confused, yeah, because CARB is a little different process, and then the RFP needs to go through.
And
CARB. So that's
Yeah,
what
this
I'm
is
saying.
a whole
Yeah,
different
it's a
process
different
because we
process,
have money from the legislature,
Right.
legislature.
Okay.
so
Through our bill
HMD
process.
is receiving the money, and then we'll use that money to do monitoring
Yeah.
or to do the work with the community to set up the emission reduction plans. We also have a little bit of that money that can use for us to contribute to the statewide best available retrofit control technology clearinghouse of the best controls. So there isn't money that's going directly to the community from AB 617. However, under other programs like this Carl Moyer program, we do that through a request for proposals.
Okay.
And then we can fund truck operators, for example, in that
For the
program.
reductions.
Exactly, yeah.
All right. Yeah, I was just trying to understand the process of AQMD, how they're going to do it. So.
Now, there is
So-
state money, there's, I believe it's $5 million out of AB 617,
Yeah.
the funding that goes, that CARB has, that can go out to community groups for capacity building.
Right.
So there is some money there, and I don't know if they're doing a request for proposals or how they're handling that program.
Yeah, I think they put it out already.
Okay.
So, you know, I was listening to the presentation, and you know, we also had those concerns about which communities should be priority, which ones should be maybe the ones that are at some point ready to do monitoring, because I mean, it's technical. There's capacity building,
Yes.
and not every community has done monitoring. And I know some. I don't know if your organization has any kind of monitoring. You know, I know that for example, they sit in an area that's highly polluted, or one of the schools close to an industry, you know, really close. You know, those could be communities that are priority that say, you know what, we don't have any data. We know this is the issue, but we don't have the data. Then how do you get to that emissions reductions? That comes next, right? The emissions reductions. There's some communities saying, I want reductions now. Right?
Yes.
And that's a tough one because, you know, we realize that pollution is already there. We just want to reduce it. But if we don't have some of this data, you know, to help us get there and to be able to present legislation or policy and say, you know what, this is what's happening, and have a better understanding of pollution, not just the community organization, but it could take a whole community to get involved, you know, and that's what we want. We want the whole community to be involved because, you know, I'm going to be a little bit transparent about what we did in Imperial County. We have a 40 air monitoring sensor station, air quality, PM 2.5. You know, I know there's other pollutants out of more concern, but PM 2.5 is a baseline. You know, any particle can attach to that PM 2.5, whether it's diesel or any other can attach to that, and you breathe that, right? So we were able to identify that by co-locating, so we co-located monitors with regulatory monitors. We were able to identify that some of these regulatory monitors have a cap validated against federal reference monitors and say, you know what, something's happening here, that the pollution is not really, you know, there's a cap on the federal monitors, the pollution is exceeding that. And we were able to identify that through a community member that's who's a scientist, right? So community monitoring can mean a lot of things to different communities. But who is that person that's going to take that next step and analyze data from government and community together to compare it? You know, now they have to, they've admitted, you know, we have issues with that monitor. Since the 1990s, we haven't done anything. It's been at that cap. So those are things that hopefully soon they're going to announce it publicly. CARB is going to announce that. You know, so what does that mean to our communities? What does it mean to emissions reductions? Does it mean that how are we going to get there if these emissions have been beyond that, right? So I think community monitoring is a good step for even capacity building because it can lead to a lot of actions and legislation as well. You know, I know that in one of our districts, they're using our community monitoring network for implementation of SB 1000, which is environmental justice element. So they're using that data for that. So there is a lot of other benefits and of course, our end goal is to get the emissions reductions. That's our end goal, to make sure that there's reductions. But I think there's a process that we need, as communities that haven't done monitoring, that we can get to that step. You know what? We have the data. Now, where do we put our focus on? Where is it that we're going to get to that? So I just wanted to add that. I mean, you know, we've done so much on air monitoring that we kind of know almost a lot of the stuff, you know, but I don't want to, you know, if you guys have any questions, I can probably be easier for me to answer some questions. You know, and I realize that communities, you know, we have CalEnviroscreen, we have the mates that you showed there. And those are tools that you guys should be using it. And I don't know if any of you in your organizations use CalEnviroscreen to look at the pollution sources there. That might be helpful. You might not even need that. You might just say, you know what, we're a priority community. And, you know, I talked to Oscar, you know, and I told him, I think that's something that you guys should do because it's not happening everywhere. And it needs to start happening soon. And hopefully some of the groups that come here, part of this can be some of the groups that these monitoring networks should go to. Because they're here, because they're in these communities.
And get that message out to your communities. That's
Yeah.
what's important.
Yeah.
Getting the message out to your communities about the meetings that we're having so that they can have input. That's the purpose of the meetings, is to have the community input. What do you want? What do you see? You're in those communities. You're grassroots there, so you know what is bothering you. You know the pollution sources. So that's important. And your knowledge and monitoring is incredibly important for this group.
Yeah, you know, and I think I had suggested on a call or in a different meeting that, you know, if there's an opportunity for technical capacity, you know, our organization has that capacity to provide that to other groups, you know, that there's somehow, that maybe some of the funding is also allocated to capacity building to other groups, technical capacity.
And what you are talking about brings up a really good point too, because there's such a range in the needs of each community and the types of monitors. So what he's talking about are relatively low-cost sensors that you can put out in the community, and you can put the results on a website. And you can kind of see where there's little hot spots and what the concentrations are. And we have a program here at AQMD that's been really instrumental in testing these sensors and showing which ones are doing a pretty darn good job, and then there's some that don't work very well. Unfortunately, there's not low-cost monitors for toxics, other than if you assume that they're with the particulates. So some of the monitoring can be relatively inexpensive, where you can put out a couple $100 monitor and give out a whole bunch of them to the community, and others are, thousands and thousands of dollars a sample to look for hex chrome. So there's a whole wide continuum. And I think the number of communities also depends on what their needs are and the types of monitoring. Because if it was all the low-cost PM2.5 sensors, we could probably handle a lot more. We actually have several different studies going on now with EPA and other air districts to do that. But if it's something that takes, a person going out and putting a sample out and preparing that sample in the lab and then coming back and analyzing it, then it really ups the cost.
And I want to add, it's not so much the monitor, the sensor, is the community engagement capacity that happens with that. That's the most important piece, because we can put monitors everywhere, but what are we going to do with the data? So we want the reductions, but how do we get the community engaged? And that's a tool that they can use and every day, make different decisions about their day-to-day activities, change that, and that's what we want to do. Change behaviors also, because and I want to losing my thought, but I want to add that what she said about the monitors. Those monitors that we have were validated. They were tested here at South Coast AQMD, and that's why our project chose to use those monitors. So our let me give you a little bit more of a background of our network, and I can share publications with the group of our network. Publications and kind of get an idea of what it means. The community engagement and the ground truthing that went on to locate these monitors. It was funded by NIHS 4 years ago, and they gave us as a partnership with Comité Cívico del Valle, California Environmental Health Tracking, and University of Washington with the science behind it. First it was Berkeley, but the scientists I was going to work with ended up in UW, so we partnered with University of Washington. So it wasn't just. It was like a $2 million down payment to get to where we're at, pretty much, to get to where we're at now. And I want to say that AB 617 is a success also of our community monitoring network, because at that time, now the state's looking at our model, like the model for the rest of the state of California, because of the whole component with tracking, with the Department of Public Health and the University of Washington, and all the science that went behind it. It wasn't just community driven, it was also science, good science, validated against government. So I can share some of those documents with some of the group with, I can send it to you, you can share them with them. I think it's important they can read those publications.
I'm writing you down on the agenda for presentation on community engagement.
And so, that's an important piece. I think the most important piece is the engagement. Yeah.
No, definitely I agree with Beto. Community engagement was one of the reasons why we were able to get Rainbow Environmental Services in Huntington Beach to push to enclose with the help of South Coast Air Quality Management District. So definitely it is a big aspect as to getting things done and making sure that companies, whatever they are, big or small, comply with state regulations, which are to protect the surrounding neighborhoods. I do have a question about the $8.6 million in funding and then choosing the 5 communities. In terms of when we identify a community, are we just choosing like parcels? Are we choosing, for example, in LA County area, you have City of Vernon, where there's a lot of companies that, sadly pollute. So how do we categorize that community versus our community in Huntington Beach? And how does the money get allocated thereafter? So instead of helping 5, can we help 10, 20, depending on their size?
Well, I think the 10s and 20s would just be beyond our capacity just to even have the meetings and do all the work that we would need to do. There's no definition in the legislation about what a community is.
Okay.
So it's open. It could be a very small area. It could be 4 or 5 cities in a row, in an area. So it's really wide open. And so that's why we're asking people, and we found it was really effective the last public meeting we had. We broke into smaller groups and we gave people 3 questions to focus on, and we came out, one of the questions was, what should you look at? And so people said, well, there ought to be a ranking system. So you look at how many mobile sources are in the area, how many stationary sources, what's your mate's cancer risk, what your EnviroScreen, and come up with sort of a quantification for that. But in terms of the areas, we are completely open for it being a group of cities or a small area within a city, depending on what the needs are. So it's still really up in the air of what it could be. And then in terms of the numbers, as I mentioned, depends a little bit on the monitoring. But you got to remember that this October we'll be told how many communities we're going to do, and it's probably going to be in the 2 to 4 number, realistically, for the first year. Let us walk before we let us run 50 miles an hour before we run 500 miles an hour, because that's really the speed we're going. But then that first year is going to be continuing, and you're going to add a second year, and you're going to add a third, and this thing is just going to balloon in terms of how much work it's going to be. It's great work, and we're very excited to do it, but we really have to be careful to do it well.
Yeah.
Especially
the
first year, because otherwise we won't get continued funding, and the program will kind of fizzle before we're able to help more communities. So.
Yeah, the idea should always be thinking ahead, and like you mentioned earlier, making sure that if we could solve the problem within a year or 2 years, and then help another community for another 2 years, reduce the emissions, the particulate matter emissions, whether it be diesel trucks, whether it be companies spraying stuff in the air to reduce odor. If we get that done within 2 years, and then help other communities, and then that's a success story, we can get more funding for the future.
One of the trickiest questions is, how do you measure success? What is success? And for some of these things, like in your area, you're looking at particulates, there's a lot of things that contribute to particulates. There's a little bit that's direct, like cars on the road and some direct processes. Most of it is kind of the chemical reactions that happen, miles and miles away that kind of build up into the particulates. So it might be you've got a community and you're doing some really good things there. You may or may not be able to see the actual improvement in the monitors. So some people are saying you need to look at asthma and hospital admissions, which that's a little scary to us because environmental factors are one very small contributor to asthma and hospital admissions. So that's a really big question still that the community is going to have to weigh in on what would success look like for you, so that we know after we've done all the things we've said we're going to do and we're monitoring and we're looking at this, how do you declare victory? And almost never have a community tell us, thank you, you've done enough, you can move on. They're always like, please don't leave us, you've been monitoring here for 5 years, we need another 5. Because there's always new information that you're learning and new things you monitor, and I can totally understand that, but we do need to start each of these with an exit strategy so that the expectations are clear and people know that, you know, we're going to monitor for this long, we're going to put into place these emission reduction strategies, and then we're going to assess and then, you know, hopefully be able to go make some improvements in other areas also.
So the legislation does have if emissions are found, this is how we're going to address that.
No.
It doesn't.
No.
They're leaving it up to the AQMDs to do that.
It sets up the process, so the districts and CARB will recommend communities, CARB will have the final say on that, and then the CARB will put out guidance on what a reduction plan needs to contain. And then each area, it'll be the district working with their community partners to say, okay, what is your problem in this area, what do you need this monitoring? And or, okay, so your problems are heavy duty diesel trucks that are idling along your main road, and you've got 3 schools here. So what can we do to change the routes, get cleaner trucks, et cetera, et cetera. So each community is going to look completely different, I suspect.
And it's very ambitious, right? And it's going to be very challenging because you've got, I've forgotten where Atsuchi's bill, which was the fence line community monitoring.
Yes.
It should be a little easier because it'll be at the refineries, right? So they can monitor what they're doing and take the corrective measures that need to be implemented. But like you said, you've got all these variables that come into play.
Right. And there's a whole lot of other studies that are going on, and we actually adopted a rule last December that requires the same thing as the Marisucci Bill 1647 for fence line monitoring, and it also required the communities to pay us to do community monitoring around the refineries. And so there'll be a public process for that as well. They're going to give us plans, we'll approve them or make them change them, and that's got to be in place by January 2020. So it'll take a little while, but each of the major refineries will have complete fence line monitoring and community monitoring. So that'll kind of help inform this process also.
I was going to say that should help.
It will.
Coterminous with what's going on here.
Yes. Yes. And we have found that some of the fence line monitoring techniques and some of the really more novel techniques are actually helping refineries and other sources find leaks that they wouldn't have otherwise found and correct them. So it's actually, there's some benefit to a refinery to do that fence line monitoring because when they have a leak, they're losing product.
Sure.
And they're potentially exposing their employees and themselves and the community. So there's a lot of benefit to that. It's very expensive. It's going to take a little while.
And fence line monitoring is actually beneficial to the community and to the industry.
Yes.
Both.
Yes.
So, you know, I know there was a meeting somewhere last summer and this came up, you know, what about us? Hey, well, this should benefit you on losing, you know, downtime or getting that violation. You know, it should benefit the industry. You know, they say, you know what, you don't, the days that you were violating, you know, you reduce that amount because you find that there's emissions happening. So that's a win-win, I think, for both. You know, and I wanted to add about community monitoring and fence line. You know, we know that fence line is more at the source, right? And community monitoring is more at the neighborhood level, like what's happening over there by that school and where the kids are playing. And that's where we want to focus at. I think that's community monitoring. We want to focus where people are playing unnecessarily next to a facility because that's the air that we're breathing in that area. So,
Thank you. Any other questions or
No.
comments?
So my question is, I've been away a long time, so I may have already addressed this. But I hear communities, and I hear communities, talk communities a lot. But I'm wondering, because certain communities don't know how to take and address organizing in a way to take and get to their city councilmen and their county council, and, you know, places, people like that, to take and address some of the rules that have come out and how they can take and how they can use the information and make it work.
I'm sorry, we didn't quite understand what you said in the beginning.
I think what she's trying to say is, you know, how do you, in terms of your partners with the community, have you been able to, did your community members know how to leverage their elected officials and partners? Like, how are they able to, you know, write or feel adequate in writing legislation and understanding, you know, how to, once they get the information, which, you know, they've been armed with the information, how do they then turn that information into power for them and leverage it uphill? How do they turn that around for them in the community?
How to engage the policymakers.
There's various ways. There's various ways to do that. You know, there's letter writing campaigns, there's phone calling, there's actually I find the best way is to actually going into your local elected's office, whether singly or as a group. As a group makes more impact. You might not be able to see that elected then, try to get on their schedule, sign their book, continued communication with them. They're all pretty much aware of what's going on. They're all aware of this bill. Certainly at the state level, they should be aware of it at the local level. That's my advice to you. Anybody else around the table? Of you guys, how do you network with your local?
Yeah, so, you know.
We know that. I'm just saying, I think what she was asking is that a lot of the community, you know, may or may not know. So, but you're saying all your partners that you're working with in community are already trained in that way, right? That's what you're saying.
Oh, not necessarily.
No.
I think I'm understanding your question is not every community is ready when it comes to monitoring, right? It's to monitor. Not every community is ready. And you make a good point in the sense that based on the presentation, the community could also mean, maybe I'm wrong, it could also mean an organization in a community that. Is that what you're trying to say? I think that's what you're trying to say. It's an organization in a community that, say, like in Vernon, for example, there's an environmental justice community already working with other community members there, and they have an engaged process already that they can, you know, come in and say, you know what, these are our priorities here. So they're already that step ahead, I think. You know, they're already that step ahead. So sometimes you might need that organization to say, you know what, this is the group here, we're all engaged, and how do we get there? How do we get monitoring here? But I think that's what she's trying to say. You know, how do you get that group? But sometimes an organization might be the one that would be. It's not the community, but the community that they work in. You know, so say it's Vernon and they cover Vernon and Commerce. I'm not sure they're even close by, but it's an example. You know, if they could cover that. For example, our monitors cover a span of about 3,000 miles, right? But it's more concentrated in the communities where between the border and Riverside County. So, you know, that's about 80 miles of monitors. 40 monitors, right? Just, you know, and we understand that pollution by the science, the pollution doesn't change very much, but I also know that it does change block by block. We've seen that in other studies in other states, in Kern County. They did some studies and pollution changes block by block. But we know that it might not change a whole lot within 2 miles. So what does that mean? How much can we cover with these communities? How much, you know, or two groups say, you know, let's work together and let's map out where we need monitors, and you work at that end, I work, and we, you know, try to meet halfway. And how do we get there? I don't know, just based on what she's saying.
Yeah. That's exactly right. Thank you very much for explaining that. That's what I mean, like leveraging partnerships that.
Yeah,
you know,
and I think it's important. The partnerships are very important, I think, in this.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I would like to follow up on the comment you said that I think that there's real importance of trying to decide when you pick the communities of how you're going to measure the health improvement, because there's, you know, not just asthma. I think there's respiratory, heart. There's a lot broad spectrum of, you know, we already know the correlation between the high pollution days, but the cost benefits, because that helps. I would
think that would really be helpful in terms of sustainability funding, because you reduce medical costs, and that's why we want to improve the air quality, so there's lower, improved quality of life for people.
And it's true because, you know, for example, back to our project, we've seen less absences in school. The superintendent said, you know what, there's less absences, less kids with asthma attacks because of the education component. They got air monitors in some of these schools. That they also have the flag notification program. So, you know, you look at air quality, somebody from the school is assigned, and then they raise a flag according to the air quality. The kids know this, they take it home. So all these are triggers that, you know, educate the whole community. And some superintendents have said, you know, we've seen a lot of improvements in our school. They're able to go for funding now, when before they couldn't because they had so many absences. So there's a lot of different ways that, you know, our metrics that get a lot of wins that happen. You know, might not be at the legislature, but even school policies or in neighborhood policies within the city. You know, when this is happening, we need to, you know, so things can start changing, and that's where the community engagement piece and education.
I think that collecting baseline data of what the status is when you go in and start would be really, really important, because there's going to be different things, not only improvement air quality, but the education awareness and people's actions that they take to protect themselves are part of it. But of course, you have to collect that baseline data first, and it could be not just hospital data, it could be school absenteeism. You know, it could be a variety of things of looking at, but collecting a baseline so then you have something to gauge your success on the health. And then that's a way to engage the community members of how can we reach people to be engaged and educate them.
So we have to do a lot of thinking about what can we do and what makes sense to do in different areas. And if you monitor, you might be able to see differences in the monitors, and then you can assume that's going to have these benefits, but still to be determined exactly what we're going to be able to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it is education. All communities want monitoring. You know, they think that's the cure-all for everything. Sometimes that's not necessarily the cure-all, but you're right. They don't know that, they haven't been educated. So that's a lot of what we need to do is more education in the communities, with community groups, your PTAs, your local groups like that really have an interest in the well-being and care of their children and residents in the community. So it's a big job. It really is. I've seen, I think, a presentation that you guys did with the school flags, and you have a real connection with the school that you guys do. We'd like to really hear more about that too, because that's invaluable. That's also teaching the kids. You start them young.
I can do a presentation next time.
Okay, great. On the agenda. Thank you.
I have it here actually.
Okay, great. Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Okay, moving right along to the next agenda item, accomplishments for 2017 and goals and objectives, yeah, really, for 2018. Does everyone have a copy of it? I don't know that we necessarily need to go through it item by item. Do you have a comment or questions on any of the accomplishments? You know, it just seems like we did more than a one-pager. It feels like we did more than a one-pager, I can tell you that. We were quite busy in 2017, ending it with our Environmental Justice Conference on December the 2nd, which was really successful. So we appreciate everyone's contributions to that, and certainly are open to ideas for 2018. On the back of that are the goals and objectives for 2018. We've got a listing of about 14 items, all of which might not be met, dealt with, and/or if you see any that you might want to add to here, please speak up or let us know. We're willing to add to it. Certainly, I think we want to go over the item air monitoring. That is really, really interesting. The assembly bills, we did 617 and 134 today, but we can certainly do more with that.
I'll add Humberto's presentation here.
Please.
And that'll be on community engagement related to air monitoring.
Okay, yeah.
Community engagement. Community engagement. Were there any questions or comments on the accomplishments 2017 or the 2018 goals? Okay, thank you. I think next on the agenda, we have a presentation by Daniela on environmental justice community partnership.
Sure. Right. That's the right button.
Okay, so as Fabian mentioned, I'll be doing a presentation on the Environmental Justice Community Partnership. Really the goal of the presentation is for us to recap what happened in 2017 and to project what will potentially happen in 2018. And we're hoping that by the end of the presentation, we'll be able to get some of your feedback on recommendations for how we could improve the outreach that we do with the community and the information that we're bringing to them. Because at the end of the day, really the goal of the partnership is to strengthen the relationships that we have with community stakeholders in EJ communities, and primarily through really meaningful engagement. And I'm really looking forward to your presentation at the next meeting, Humberto, because I think that it will really help tie everything in when it comes to how we can really involve community members. So in 2017, we conducted 4 community workshops. And the purpose of the workshops were really for us to go out into the community. We had 1 workshop in each of the 4 counties that we serve. And it was really an effort to bring information to the community about who we are, what we do, and simultaneously receive information from the community on their air quality concerns. So those were a big success. We reached hundreds of people in community workshops that really were attended by a variety of people. We also recognized 4 environmental justice leaders in the community. The purpose of those were to recognize individuals who have really led the effort to address air quality concerns in their communities. We think that it's very important for us to recognize these individuals so that people will see them as leaders and recognize who they are, but also to strengthen the relationship that we have with them and collaborating with them throughout the years. We hosted 3 advisory council meetings. Ideally, we would like to have 4, but we understand that people's schedules sometimes, especially during the holidays, get really busy. So we're hoping to have 4 meetings this year. In 2017, we also hosted the first college student bus tour specifically for the EJCP program. And that was a great success. We partnered with Cal State Los Angeles and took students from an urban pollution class to learn more about different sites throughout Los Angeles. We took them to ports, a rail yard facility, and to Exide Technologies. And it just so happens that the rendering facilities are actually not too far from there. Maybe I should hold off on the little details of it. But it was very fascinating. It was very fascinating to hear how a lot of the students are actually from the local community and didn't know what the smell was. There was a girl who said, "Oh my gosh, we always smell dog food, but we don't know where it's coming from." And she was very surprised to learn that it was from the rendering facility that's close by. So that was a great event. And we had our first interagency summit. This was actually a result of a meeting, a community workshop, in which the community stated that they have a hard time identifying what agencies, what government agencies they should be reporting environmental problems to. There's a lot of confusion. There's so many that they don't really know who to call. And a lot of times what happens is that a lot of these environmental problems go unreported because they don't have the information that they need. So we hosted the first interagency summit. It was a collaboration with a number of LA County agencies to really talk about how we can better collaborate on addressing environmental justice issues, environmental complaints, and how we can make it easier for people to make these phone calls or send these emails and make these complaints.
It was
And-
one community group. Ours.
Yeah, you were there. We had a number of community groups there. We invited more, but only a certain number of them attended. And that's something that hopefully we'll get more participation of in the future. We also hosted the 3rd Annual Environmental Justice Conference. For 2017, the overarching theme was really on addressing kind of the political dynamic, the legislative aspect of environmental justice, in part because of what was happening at the federal level. There was a lot of pessimism to a certain degree on the federal level, but at the same time, at the state level, there was a lot of optimism because we had one of our most successful years when it comes to air issues, air quality issues. So that was the main topic for 2017. Some of the lessons learned in 2017, these are just a number of them. That's not to say this is all we learned, but some of the highlights. The community really wants us to improve our outreach efforts. We have a department that dedicates itself specifically to outreach, and it's a very dedicated team. We go directly to the community. We send out emails. We have publications. We do videos. We do social media. We do media relations. But there are still segments of the community that would like to be incorporated into our communication efforts, so we're working towards that. They also want us to provide more information on incentive programs. So a lot of these communities already know there's an air quality problem in their communities, so how can they not now be proactive in the process of perhaps buying a cleaner vehicle or replacing certain technologies in what they do to help clean the air. They also want to hear more, the community wants to hear more about affordable air quality monitoring, which is part of what we have already been talking about. They also want us to give them more of an opportunity when we go to the community to ask questions and network. We do allow opportunities for networking and questions during our events, but they want us to expand some more on that. They also want us to address community concerns at the meeting as opposed to perhaps following up on them. They want us to have more answers during the meeting. So what we're starting to do is taking people from different departments that can directly address their concerns on the spot. We learned also that email, social media, and partnership collaboration really works magic when it comes to engaging the community. And what we want to focus on throughout the year is engaging our community partnerships throughout the year, our community partners, as opposed to just having one event throughout the year. So having learned what we've learned throughout 2017, what is going to be our focus for 2018? And considering the passing of AB 617 and AB 134 and the number of issues and things that are happening throughout the state, we really want to focus on the technology. What is the role of technology in the future of environmental justice and in the future of solving some of these environmental justice concerns? How is technology going to play an integral part in solving these problems? So what we're going to do is build momentum towards the end of the year for our capstone event, which is the Environmental Justice Conference, and really focus our different events before that focused on technology. So again, we'll have 4 workshops, 1 in each county. We'll look to recognize 4 environmental justice leaders or organizations. We'll aim for 4 advisory council meetings and work with you to make sure that the dates work for everyone. We hope to have another college student bus tour, so if you know of a school or anyone who would be interested in collaborating with us, let us know. We'll be having an interagency summit as a follow-up to last year's, kind of with the next steps and a summary of what happened. And like Fabian mentioned, we do have the executive summary on the table for you to take a look at, and it's really fascinating to see what was on there. And again, ending with the EJ conference. So our theme throughout the year will be technology. As we're aiming and building up the momentum towards the conference, like I mentioned, we'll have 4 community workshops. And what our vision is, we recently had a workshop in Orange County we formatted in the form of a lunch and learn. And we found that this was actually very successful, very effective in conveying the message. Really what it is a 2-hour community meeting. People come, have lunch, and we have a panel of speakers talking about some of the programs happening here at the AQMD and how those programs can benefit the community. People were very receptive. We was focused on electric vehicles, and we had electric vehicles lined up in the front of the venue. People were just very curious, very into what was going on, and what we want to do is replicate that. So what we're hoping to get is your feedback on some of the workshop topics. We're hoping to have a template of events that we can replicate in each of the counties. We're aiming to have 3 presenters to speak on any of these topics that are listed here. And what we're asking you, I guess, is are there any topics listed on this PowerPoint presentation slide that you would like us to focus on? This was created in part by our internal EJ working group, and that's actually something I didn't mention on here, but I definitely want to mention. We found that there are different departments within AQMD that are working on different aspects of environmental justice, whether it's on the technology that's going to help communities, on the legislation that's going to be implemented, on the enforcement, going out and making sure that businesses are operating within the permits and rules and regulations. So what we want to do is get everyone together around the table so that we're better able to coordinate and make our team more effective and more efficient. So that's something that we started this year, and Jill is chairing that group. And so of this list, is there anything specifically that you would like to have us focus on? I guess if I go one by one, so alternative fuel vehicles, anything that's just cleaner than the traditional fuels, electric vehicles, zero emission and near zero emission heavy duty trucks, whether it's technology or engines that are being implemented into existing trucks that would help communities that are perhaps affected by a lot of truck traffic. Our MAKES 5 study, sensors, the STAR grant. Actually, Humberto, do you want to tell them a little bit about the STAR grant? Humberto is actually a recipient of the STAR grant and can share a little bit more about it.
Yeah, so I was gonna say number 3, can it be just zero emission, not near zero? For the STAR grant, yeah, so Southwest AQMD got a STAR grant, US EPA, right? STAR grant to do community citizen science project. This wasn't really a community monitoring network. It's more of a citizen science where yourself, you take the sensor and you relate back, your experience of working with the sensor. And we did a contract with AQMD with 3 communities in Imperial County, Kern County, and Fresno. So each community got about 25 monitors. You gave them out to the community member. So literally, they're their own citizen science. It's a project for them to take on their own. Minimal input from the organization within just a couple of meetings and what best practices. And so at the end of the project, they'll come back and say, what were the benefits of having this monitor at your home or wherever you placed it at. So kind of just describing back, what are the benefits of just having this monitor. And there were purple air monitors. I don't know, some of you might have heard of purple air monitors before. So I think that's good.
Thank you.
Okay, keep it short.
Yeah, thank you. So is there anything on this list that you would like us to focus on? Again, we would have potentially 3 speakers talking on any 3 of these subjects during our lunch and learn.
So the audience that came, because you said you had pretty good participation, what was it, a broad audience or more of one or the other?
It was pretty broad. How many people did we have at that event? Like
we had about 60, and that was a large part of it was elected officials, local elected officials from Orange County.
Which project? Which one?
For the most recent lunch and learn that we had a number of elected officials that attended from Orange County. We had a few community organizations and community residents. For our other events, I think that the numbers are a little bit different in terms of who comes to our events. We have significantly more community and community organization participation when we go, for example, to like Los Angeles or San Bernardino and Riverside. So it just varies on who is interested in coming.
I would say, well, I'd like zero emission, but I think there's a lot of education across the board that can be done. I guess you could gear it toward maybe electeds, like when they're building something in their community, like a warehouse or something similar, where they can require the new structure to have zero emission things on site, and maybe certain trucks coming in, they could build that in, and that a little bit into the planning part if they were aware of it. That, you know, there's a lot of people think that this is so far off that, you know, we're not there yet. But so I think, again, it's across the board. I think you could educate depending on your audience, but you could skew it different ways, your talk. But I think there's, for electeds on the local city level, that would be important, and even citizens to know what's available right now that that could be used in your community to reduce emissions from the trucks.
And if I may, so I appreciate this, and I would like to point out something about number 3. So it's good to hear that you're working together to coordinate and understand what different groups in the agency at AQMD are doing and working together. And I'd just like to point out that I'm not sure how familiar all of you are with the Cummins Westport ultra-low NOx heavy-duty truck that was recently certified to CARB's ultra-low NOx standards. So they reduce NOx emissions by 90%. That truck was actually developed with funding from AQMD and CalEnviroscreen. So it's an important part of the discussion and should be used at the workshop.
Excuse me, your name, please?
I'm Priscilla Hamilton.
And you're from?
CalEnviroscreen.
Ah, welcome. And thank you for your comment. I love it.
Any other topics? So I have here a potential focus on different technologies that help reduce emissions for facilities and for the trucks, and perhaps inviting elected officials to come and learn about that to potentially encourage new businesses that are coming in to implement that technology or to convert to that technology. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, if you were going to do that, I would really want to target your electeds or representatives from their elected that's actually decision makers within cities.
Okay.
And planning, it may be,
I
may not
was
be the
gonna
city
say
council, it may
planning,
be planning
yes,
people.
Planning should be there, absolutely.
Planning people, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because they're the
Especially
ones
now
that make
with
the
the
decisions. Yeah.
SB 1000, you know, I think it's important that
Mhm.
they're listening to these concerns.
What is replace your car?
So Replace Your Ride is an incentive program that.
It's hard outside, you can have it.
Yeah. Sounds like Pimp My Ride if you remember the show.
Yeah.
So Replace Your Ride is a program through our technology advancement department that provides incentives to particularly you receive more incentives if you're from a low-income community to replace your vehicle for something cleaner. So what's the year that they start replacement in that?
Yeah, I got to see the chart.
It's a great program.
It's on our website.
It's all on our website, Replace Your Ride, and actually we've had information here in the past, but what I can do is I can email you all as a follow-up some more information on who's eligible, what the requirements are. But it's a great program, and like I said, people who come from disadvantaged communities are able to potentially receive more money.
So I think that would be, since we use so much our cars, and sometimes the older cars are cheaper, but if we share that information, there's an incentive, and also the educational part that would be really good.
Sounds good. Yeah, and actually, as a matter of fact, people also received information during our Orange County event about Replace Your Ride, and definitely a lot of interest in it.
And I think it goes, I mean, particularly if they're the Replace Your Ride, because I think it's cleaner technology versus just electric ones. So
right.
They trying to get them into the used electrics, because understanding how long, yeah, it may be 2 or 3 years old, so it's more 4 years, whatever. But the technology's come a long ways, so electric vehicles, they actually last a lot longer. So it's, you know, there's that you still have a lot of lifespan in used electric vehicles still. So there's not just about how to go about it, but also I think kind of maybe a little bit of focus on the electric vehicles, the used ones, and how it's important to that you can get into one of those and drive it for at least 4 years, probably not 8 years. I've known people who have driven Priuses, I mean, hybrids, but bought used and then drove it for at least 6 years. and it was used, so.
Yeah, so a focus on replace your right with a focus on.
I think electric, I mean, it kind of ties into the second one, but, you know, really educating them on buying used electric vehicles.
Yeah, and I think that's
Because they're gonna save money too.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's one of the things that really benefits a lot of people too, is that they are able to buy a used one, so they're receiving.
Well, with gas tax too, I mean, with the increase, and who knows, with, you know, it just, that's a cost savings. So again, that goes with explaining what your return on investment is going to be and reducing your monthly bill, and then incentives to get charging maybe in your own home or whatever, all those types of things kind of wrapped in together.
One thing that I didn't see on there, maybe it's because it's not within the jurisdiction of AQMD, but also focusing on inside the home, air quality inside the home of low-income tenants. I'm not sure if that's something that we could focus on, making sure that they have efficient refrigerators, maybe change from a gas stove to an electric. Are there incentives or a workshop that can help with that? I'm not sure. But that's something that we're going through in the city of Huntington Beach through a program. So just an idea. Or just,
It really is, we kind of straddle the line because we really don't have the authority or the resources to do indoor air quality. Although we've had some programs for, David was just talking about, you can replace your fireplace, a wood burning fireplace with a natural gas or other type of a fireplace. But indoor air quality is not necessarily our expertise.
Okay.
But there are ways, we have done some programs where we've taken some funds and used them for energy efficiency upgrades in homes for settlements and things. So we dabble a little bit in that direction, but it's not probably one of our top areas.
Well, maybe it's not the topic at the event, but wherever your event's being held is looking at, you know, if it's data center or whoever, or what the city's doing or whatever going on around that, because when you have people captive, you should let them know about resources to do that. So it's maybe more of just inviting them to come and participate and interact with people to let them know about what they're providing through that.
Yeah, that's a good idea, because cities could, you know, have programs that we don't have, you know, necessarily in place. So that's a good idea.
Or when you do like the interagency summit, you know, where you partner with other agencies, make sure that we include that in maybe.
Okay, great.
Potentially have a resource table, invite them and invite them for an opportunity to have a resource table with material that people can walk through at the end and get more information.
Because that would be a great way, and they would probably welcome the idea because they're usually doing outreach to inform people about what's available. So
And that's creating another partnership.
Yeah.
I love it. Yes, yes. So thank you, Terry. That's great. Okay.
Anybody else, any topics on here that you'd like to see? Or anything that's not listed?
How successful has the electric lawnmower been?
The lawnmower, I believe that,
Is it replacement, or is that the replacement one, or is that?
Commercial.
Oh, commercial.
it's for commercial. You know, I don't have statistics, but I can follow up with some information. I can reach out to Lourdes and get some statistics on that, or maybe ask her to come in and do a brief presentation. Anything else? Okay, so we do need to be done by like 1:45. They have another meeting immediately after this. So for the 2018 Environmental Justice Conference, again, going with the theme of technology, we're thinking about titling this year's Environmental Justice Conference, Technology's Role in the Future of Environmental Justice. And if you have any feedback on other potential titles we can give it, please, that's what we're hoping to get, is your feedback on what will resonate best with the community. Do you have any recommendations on potential keynote speakers, breakout panels, breakout sessions, anything for this specific conference? If you haven't participated in the conferences in the past, it's usually a one-day event where we invite a keynote speaker to talk about environmental justice issues as they relate to air quality. We have breakout groups where we divide different rooms into different topics. One room will talk about technology, another room will talk about like the health aspect. There will be another one that focuses on the community engagement and community aspect to it. So we try to develop themes within the conference and the breakout rooms so that they're specific to the people who are attending. In the past, we've had about 300 people attend, anywhere from organizers, doctors, nurses, business leaders, elected officials. So it really is a very diverse group who attends. So what we can potentially do, if you can't, if you don't have any ideas now, we can open it up for you to send us some ideas by email. But if you want to keep an eye out, if you see any articles of people who, you know, are thought leaders, or if you yourself are interested, we also look for moderators to moderate these groups. So if you're interested in being a moderator, we certainly welcome that, or if you have any recommendations.
Are you gonna do it downtown LA again, or are you gonna?
We're in the process of looking for a venue right now. So once we have that identified, we'll let you know. But we're looking at September. Nothing set in stone yet, but we are working to get that done as soon as possible so that we can start initial outreach.
Did you like that venue in particular?
It was a very nice venue, and I was like awesome driving in from the Inland Empire. I got here in River. I don't think I ever got to downtown LA. And having a time going home was different, but getting here was awesome.
And this year was on a weekend, right?
Yeah,
It was on a Saturday.
Last year was on a Thursday.
Yeah,
Right.
so traffic was, of course, I didn't go the year before, but that was better.
So that might have been.
It was actually good, but and I was in the two breakouts. I was actually surprised there was a number of people from the Inland Empire, because I think that's a whole. You want to make sure you get those people in here, but there tend to be more groups that I think came together, because I do think we need to have. So I didn't know if you're thinking moving it out just a little bit, or maybe you get your maximum crowd by doing it in LA, like downtown. I don't know.
Yeah, and to the matter of weekend versus weekday, the feedback at the end of each conference, we do a survey to get feedback from everyone, and the feedback has been mixed. Some people are for weekday, some people are for the weekend, and vice versa. I mean, we hear everything. So I think what we're going to do is switch every year. One year we'll do a weekend, the next year we'll do a weekday. And I think what we're looking at potentially this year is having it during the week, just to kind of be fair to everyone and what the feedback has been in the survey. Do you have any more feedback for those who attended on ways we can potentially improve, or something you might have not liked?
It would just be nice to see even more people. I mean, you go to all the trouble to put that on, and it covers 4 counties, and I think it's a very select group that actually wind up going. So, I mean, it would be nice to see another 100 people there, just because I know how hard it is to plan those things.
Yes.
Yeah, it does take a lot of time and effort. So we're on the same page. We would love to see more people there, and I think that the sooner we're able to, hone in on the details, the location, and all that, we can start our outreach. And we'll certainly look to all of you to help us with the outreach, perhaps helping us by tweeting about it, or Facebooking it, or Instagramming it, and maybe it's distributing flyers to your email distribution list. That always helps, and we find that that's been very helpful for us in the past. Any other feedback or questions about the conference this year? So some examples of potential breakout topics, part of the discussion, certainly it's not to say that we are in the business of creating jobs, but some of the discussion that has been kind of happening is green jobs, and what are the opportunities for people to work in the industry of air quality. Making data available for everyone, potentially through public-private partnerships. There's the idea that, there's the idea of transparency and making data available to everyone, but what do you do with that data once you receive it? How do you interpret it? How do you make sure that people know how to read that information? How technology is helping health providers address EJ issues in communities. Potentially something about grants and rebates that's available for specifically green technology, and community and private partnerships in delivering technology to the community. So these are just some examples of potential topics. Not to say that's what we'll go for, but if you want to email us some ideas, please let us know. Or if you have some now.
No, I was just thinking, with community monitoring, I know that UC Riverside has a entry level, some program right now on air quality and climate change, some program, I didn't really look too much into it. But maybe it's an opportunity now that, we can provide some, no, maybe not at the workshop, but just in general, some training to the youth or somebody, because community monitoring is not just, it's what monitoring takes to go check on the monitor. We have community sensors, 40 of them. That's a lot of work to maintain. We don't go out there every day, but to keep them running to make sure that that's running. So it might be somewhere we can add that, or AQMD can say, you know what, let's do a program with an entry level or certification or just like introduction to basic air monitoring technician jobs in the area. And I don't know, I'm just thinking, because with community monitoring, it's gonna create jobs as well.
Absolutely.
So might have a little program that says, an intro into air quality monitoring for people that are interested in that kind of work, kind of field, environmental field work.
We did a couple of STEM conferences where people came in and talked about the different disciplines, and it was geared toward students.
I like it.
So we might even have the infrastructure available for that. I don't remember how many years ago it was, but I used to give a presentation.
Nice. So maybe even a breakout group or a breakout during the conference specifically for like the youth and the young
If we could
leaders.
do
That's something we
sufficient
haven't done.
outreach to get younger people to attend.
And that's through the week, so they're in school through the
Yeah,
week.
high school
But
and
certainly.
college students.
College
Yep.
students maybe.
Who are considering careers.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So like the third one about healthcare providers, I mean, are you trying to reach out to them to get them to come to the event, or?
We reach out to them as well. A lot of the people who come to our events are usually nurses. We have received questions about whether or not that can count as a nursing point. We haven't quite. I think we haven't been able to do it, but I think that if we're able to develop the right partnership to see if that's something that can be done, and with the help of legal to make sure it's something that we can do, we would certainly be open to it.
And here's where, I mean, if legal will let you do it.
Should I step out?
No, it's through we have the ALA has partnership in California, the California Thoracic, the California Society of Respiratory Care, we do the CPS too, but, so anyway, we work with them to provide for nursing CEUs and for respiratory therapists, because that's really, they're usually interested in respiratory things. I mean, it's pretty simple, but if they were willing to partner with you, then it'd be a very nominal cost actually, and fairly easily to do, I found out. Now, if you wanted to try to get doctors seen, this is a whole other complicated. I don't think it would be too difficult for you to do, but the other one might be doable for providing for some of your sessions.
Okay.
That's a possibility.
Maybe can we talk a little bit more about that? That'd be great. Thank you. Anything else?
I mean, this is kind of in healthcare providers. One of the things the ALA is doing, it was done up in Montana this past year because of the wildfires, and they did a webinar they got a grant, so part of it was a webinar to reach healthcare providers so they can work with their patients, prepare them what to do during wildfires for their health. So we're looking to replicate that. I know in Northern California we're looking for funding in Southern California too, but so we're being proactive versus reactive because a lot of stuff happened with Northwood, all the fires and stuff. So we're trying to really look, because that's a whole segment of the population that deals with everybody, but also respiratory patients, and they should be preparing their patients. And if we can get funding to actually provide, air purifiers, masks, things like that, to that, so they're prepared for when something happens versus after it happens.
Yeah.
We still have member updates to do. So
let me quickly get through the next slide. In terms of the Interagency Summit, we'll make sure to invite you guys to that event. Like I mentioned, it's been really a collaborative effort to get people to improve on how we can address environmental issues. And once we get that set in stone, we'll let you know. these are the next upcoming meetings, and do these dates in general work for you, or do you have any feedback on potentially changing any of those dates? Okay, so I'll follow up with a couple of you over the phone and send a follow-up email to get your feedback on potential speakers, breakout group sessions, and potentially topics or other speakers and partners for our workshops. But I appreciate you all being here, and hopefully this will be a great 2018.
Is that it? Okay, great, thanks. Let's go around the room and do member updates. You're new, so what we
Yes.
do is, and welcome. We
Thank
really,
you.
really love you being here. What we
Appreciate it.
kind of do is just give updates about what's happening in your community. So forth. Would we like to have someone else go first so that he kind of gets an idea? You've done it Yenny before.
Yenny with Orange County Environmental Justice. As last year we did surveys, and one of the topics that came up was around water. So this year we're going to be doing educational and maybe if there's funding, testing of water. And we are also going to be hosting a series of Let's Talk EJ once a month. So with that, as someone that could share information, and actually wanted to see if we could host a workshop, or get material. That's going to be at least once a month on different topics.
Great.
And if we do set the conference whenever we know when it's going to be, that could be a place where everybody that's being engaged in those workshops, that they could possibly go. We're also going to be looking into. There's a report that came out. There are high levels of lead in the city of Santa Ana that were found, and we're following up on that, and in particular working with youth. With that, so that's a group that I would invite as we grow that to the conference. But I remember 2 years ago when I went, they were high school students. Actually, there was some high school group from Anaheim, and I love the idea that if there could be a breakout session specifically for you, that could be targeted, and that's the way that we can get youth there, right? Like that they know that there's something that then the school will be able to let them, take the day because it's so educational, right? But it's targeted, and if they know about it, I think that would be a good thing. But so then I'm thinking about the youth that I'm going to be working with to bring them. And well, those are the major things. But I think there's sharing the information as the organization is being known, since we're fairly new. I am getting phone calls of who to call, so that I'm really interested in the interagency information, so I can have that information, but also to direct. I do need to do follow-up. I quickly mention it, Daniela, that I did get a phone call that someone was trying to contact the agency, AQMD, and that there was some issues. I don't have all the information, so I need to get that.
Please let us
but then,
know. Yes.
I know that there can be, right? I'm here to facilitate that, and that is just getting to know, right? Just getting to know the different agencies, and as we do the work that we're supposed to be doing, people are going to want to know more, right?
Sure.
And have that. So that's something that is good, and at the same time a little bit scary because I don't have all the information, and I just don't want to give someone's number directly, and you'll get it. So knowing, right, who to
Give
call.
Daniela's number.
But knowing exactly.
Yeah, and if they're Spanish speaking, I'm happy to speak to them.
Absolutely.
So feel free. I have no problem with that.
Can we get her that 2-page information sheet that had all of the numbers listed on it?
I have that. I was going to ask them. Great, thank you.
Yeah, that has all of DTSC, water board, it has all of the numbers that you can refer to.
I'll send that to everyone actually. If they
Yeah,
put
that
that
would
as
be
an
great.
action item, then I'll follow up with it.
And then lastly, we're going to be having monthly community meetings to grow our base, but to also share whatever resources are available. So kind of doing if I get that information, then to just always have them there. So people, as they come to our meetings, people have that information.
Can you send us a schedule of the meetings and we can send it out, because other folk might want to go to that also. And we're available, we might want to stop in and see what's going on. As I said, we have a Young Leaders Advisory Council here. The group is 18 to 30. So we would love to network with you on that. Great, great. Okay,
I'm like, that's how it's done.
Yeah, my update. So I just want to say that back in 2016, South Coast went to Coachella Valley and did a community meeting. Last year, we didn't want AQMD to go back until they have something for us, you know. I just want to say that because the community already knows of the issues there, right? But I wanted to add that this year we're going to be adding air monitors. We already have the site for Coachella Valley, 5 monitors. And we want to invite you guys to come to that launch event for the monitors, because then I also want to talk about, you know, the partnership of AQMD, because we co-located with one of your monitor locations out there, and hoping that maybe you guys can match the 5 monitors at some point that we put out there, you know. And I was wondering about, it's probably not related, but it is. So for AB 617, you think there's any resources for a zero emissions vehicle so we can do our maintenance on our air quality monitors?
I don't know if there's any.
Let's talk about that later.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Because, you know, as we're checking our monitors, you know, we show up in a gas-powered vehicle. You know, it makes sense. Hey, you guys have your system going, and we show up in a clean vehicle, right?
And we were just in Coachella Valley on January 31st.
Yeah.
Meeting with the Coachella Valley Environmental Justice Task Force. So you guys let us back in for a minute.
Huh? Yeah.
And it was a great meeting.
Yeah, it was.
We appreciate being out there. It was a great meeting.
Yeah. So I don't really have much of an update.
Thank you.
Other than the intra-agency thing, I think that's really good. We have a model like that in Riverside County where all the different agencies participate. So when somebody submits a report, the water board is tasked to look at that report. But that water board person contacts South Coast, contacts DTSC, whoever it is that needs to be at that when that report comes in. So I could follow up with you about how that works. It's a good model, and it's worked very well. And actually, right now EPA is doing an enforcement initiative. I don't know if it's happening. I think it's happening in Pomona, happening in Oakland, in Imperial. So intra-agency groups are showing up to facilities throughout California as an enforcement, just showing up at different facilities. So that might be something, you know, I can.
I thought so.
Yeah, it's an enforcement initiative.
Is
I think you guys are part of that too, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's intra-agencies, you know, and doing these kinds of things. So I can share that with one of the EPA persons that's the one in charge of this initiative, and maybe, you know, reach out to other groups in Orange County and San Diego, or wherever, you know, that can benefit of these kinds of initiatives. Because ultimately, you know, what I said, you know, you don't want to show up and make them compliant. You want to show up and enforce. They already know what they got to do, right? So that's all. But today the press put a thing out. The county supervisor put a thing out. EPA is going to be out here. I'm just warning you guys, industry. I can share that. It's funny because I saw it this morning. So they reached out to the local county supervisors, and they're coming out there. And I go, we don't want them to know because, you know, they're going to put it out there. And it came out in the newspaper. Hey, they're going to be showing up. EPA is showing up with their enforcement team. You know, so now, you know, that deters some of the stuff that we're like, oh, you know, we want them to show up and make these
Get them to
corrected.
clean up their act. And
Yeah, clean up their act. Don't warn them.
That's all bad thing, though, too.
Yeah. Anyways, that's it.
Thank you. Humberto, can you send us the flyer for the launch event of the monitors? Are you guys inviting the general community, or is it invite only?
It's so we're gonna do so April 21st, Desert Mirage High School has a parent resource fair, where there about 300 or 500 community members show up. So we're gonna do an initial introduction to the program there, and then the launch is gonna be more of the school officials, local leaders, community members also that were engaged in the process to put the monitors up, but a more of a smaller, intimate group, you know, and we want you guys to be there because you're the regulatory agency, of course, on air quality. So I want to invite Wayne to speak, maybe a few words at that event.
Okay, all right.
So I'll follow.
Great. Terry.
Mine's mostly educational, but we are holding what we call an Asthma Educator Institute. We've had a couple of them going on throughout the state. It is geared for healthcare professionals. Hopefully they'll sit for the exam to be a certified asthma educator. But it's a 2-day event. does cost money. We did one in the Inland Empire in Loma Linda at the end of February. We had 62 people come. We're holding one in Orange County at UC Irvine on the 9th and 10th of April. And then we're doing one in Fresno in June on 12th and 13th at UCSF Fresno. So those are really geared to get those clinicians or nurses, RTs treating patients with asthma. School nurses, we had a group of school nurses to sit for the exam or at least have a higher level of education on treating the asthma. We also have our Lung Force Expos, which is it's a one-day event with dual tracks. One track is for patients and caregivers, and the other one is for healthcare professionals. So we have one coming up next Friday on June 30th at Loma Linda. We've partnered with them. So we're going to have, our goal is to have 100 patients. We have about 40 right now, caregivers, and then we have about 150 healthcare professionals so far registered. And so that's free for patients. There's a fee because there's CEUs and CMEs for the healthcare professionals. We are also having one in Los Angeles on June 30th. Well, actually, it's in Monrovia. And same concept. And then we're going to have one in Orange County on October 5th. So we've got the venue secured. We don't have a flyer yet. So those are all coming up in the next several months. More educational that we're working on.
Wonderful, thank you. All right, now your turn.
Last, my turn. So I have 3 things that we've been working on. Offshore drilling through the coast of the city of Huntington Beach. It usually throughout the month we get some type of weird smell, and it's usually people, because they don't know how to report. This isn't just an EJ community, it's the entire city of Huntington Beach. So because we've been through the process of telling our own community, hey, call this number, we were able to tell them, people who live in the Huntington Harbor area, hey, we've been through this, contact this number. And so it was found that hydrogen sulfide was found. And so they're still trying to locate where it's coming from. Is it coming from inland facility, like in the city of Huntington Beach? There's still a lot of oil wells, or an offshore drilling site. So we're still trying to figure that out. Another thing, you've probably heard about the homeless situation in the county of Orange. Now Supervisor Michelle Steele wants to put a couple homeless folks in Huntington Beach, but that site is contaminated with methane gas. So we still have to, we have to help the population, but we can't just put them in a contaminated area. So what's our role going to be? 1, as a community, and 2, as a regulatory agency through South Coast Air Quality Management District, and 3, I think that's it for now, actually.
Okay, thank you. Any other business? Oh, I'm so sorry. I did forget you guys. We've got Loretta Jones and Suma on the phone. Member updates. Loretta.
Sorry, we was on mute. Yeah.
Do you have any member updates?
Updates.
This is Suma. Should I? Hello?
You want to get an update?
Well, while they're thinking, Suma, if you could go ahead, please.
Yeah. So I guess a couple of things. I was encouraged to see that I think the area district is trying to expand the types of data that can be used for enforcement purposes. If I'm not mistaken, I saw something about that. I think that especially when we're talking about data collection, monitoring data collection, and whether or not how then to operationalize that data, especially from given that I'm a lawyer, from an enforcement perspective, I'd be curious maybe in the next meeting to see where things stand. I think it's really important as we talk about low-cost monitors to ensure that the data that results from those important monitoring efforts have legal significance. And so I was encouraged to see that I think the Air District is attempting to work on that. Is that correct?
So are you talking about our proposed rule that talks about credible evidence and circumvention?
Yeah.
Yes,
Oh,
okay.
okay.
That's separate from these low-cost monitors, which at this point are not federal reference methods or approved laboratory methods for compliance purposes. So they may get there someday, but right now it's more for information, and it can help us identify an area that we need to go in and look at in a more robust and legally accepted manner at this point. But right now there's usually a disclaimer that they're not to be used for compliance or enforcement purposes. But it's not to say that it's not really valuable in terms of helping us to say, oh, there's something here that we need to look in, and then we can take in a reference method and then follow up on that.
Well, I guess the point remains that I think that from an EJ perspective, it's important to be able to continue to think about how to democratize some of this information and enforceability. It's an important tool for the community to be able to, the citizen suit pathways, and and for the Air District to be able to, and the various government agencies with enforcement authority to be able to use data that's collected for enforcement purposes. So, in any event, I guess another thing I wanted to. Another issue I wanted to raise was, the interaction, again, related to data, the interaction between trade secrets and how companies are using, how industry might be using or potentially misusing trade secret protections under the Public Records Act to prevent not only the public but the Air District itself from seeing the information it needs to make informed decisions. So, that's another issue I think it's important for this group to be aware of and keep track of. And what else? I think that's it for now. I've been enough of a black cloud.
Right, not a black cloud. Those are outside. Trust me. Thank you, Sumi. We appreciate that. Loretta.
Yes.
Hi, did you have any updates for us?
I just wanted to ask a question about staffing.
About staffing?
How you decided to hire the new staffing? What kinds of people were you hired? From community.
Oh, are you referring to the AB 617 positions?
Yes.
And your specific question was?
How many minorities have been hired that?
Oh, what kinds of positions? Gosh.
How many have been hired?
Oh, okay. Jill's gonna answer that one.
So we're actually just getting started on many of those recruitments. There's a variety of different positions, ranging everything from more people to write some of our rules for the best technology. So we're hiring some technical air quality specialist level people. That requires a related degree. We're hiring some additional people to work in our laboratory to process some of the samples and to go out and do the monitors. There was actually a board letter in December. I can ask Daniela to send that to you, or at least an excerpt, a table that shows the number and the types of positions that we're hiring for both of the two programs. We're hiring contract assistants for the heavy-duty vehicle replacement program. We're hiring kind of a whole lot of different levels. I think there's probably at least 12 or 14, if I recall, different positions. Each of those positions has a different set of minimum requirements, but that's all available on our website. And then, you know, we're hiring as quickly as we can.
Sounds good.
Great.
Sounds good to me.
Thank you.
We'll make certain that all around the table gets that. Okay, was there anything else, Loretta?
No, there wasn't, not at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other business? Any public comment?
Yes, please. Yes. I just want to introduce myself to everyone. My name is Yvonne Martinez-Watson. I am the chair of the brand new Sierra Club Angeles Chapter's Environmental Justice Committee. I've been coming to some of these group meetings for a while now. I'm sure everybody here with staff on SCAQMD has seen me for years. And we are just starting off as a committee. So we are in the process right now of formulating our projects for this year and into the next year. I'm really interested in a lot of things that I heard today. There's a lot of groups here that we have not, as a Sierra Club, been able to connect with you yet. I would really love to connect with some of you people. We are building our own network right now. We have already submitted one comment letter on a project in LA. We also submitted a comment letter on the Culver City's Inglewood oil field specific plan. For that particular plan, I brought up the idea of environmental justice because they were using, the only air monitoring source they were using was located 10 miles away from the oil field. And I believe it was either AQMD's monitor or it might have been a state monitor. And so that is unacceptable. That's where they're getting their data from, is 10 miles away. So I'm just here to make myself available to anybody and to start participating more with these meetings. I don't know if it will be me or if it will be one of our representatives from our community, from our committee, I'm sorry. So thank you very much, and I do have some other questions I want to raise with staff afterwards, but it's on a different topic. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Yvonne, and welcome and congratulations on your new committee.
Thank you.
Yeah, congratulations. If there's no other public comment, our next meeting date is May 23rd, and you'll receive reminders about that. Any other comments that you might have, suggestions or recommendations, please let us know. And with that, the meeting is adjourned.